I believe that security is just a superstition, and as Helen Keller said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And if you have the innovation, if you have the idea, and if you have the most important element, which is the will, then you can do literally everything in the world.
Hi everyone, this is Nitish Jain and we have Parth Bhatt with us today. He's a young, for me, he's a young influencer because he influences action. We meet a really few people, few young people who are taking action per se, not just advocating about the change which you want, and that's really important. And I'm personally really inspired by the work Parth is doing because he's not just trying to make a change in his local community, but he's involved in international, multilateral, and bilateral negotiations, communications, and change-making campaigns. And along with that, he's even taking a lot of action on his own. I mean, he's doing so much that it's better that we hear about his journey from him itself. So, welcome on the show, Bart, and it's amazing to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine. So, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Bart. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
What are you up to these days, right now?
Nowadays, as the travel restrictions have eased up, traveling a lot, attending a lot of meetings, interacting with people, and empowering people, spreading awareness about issues, global issues the world is facing today. So yeah, that's pretty summed up.
That's amazing, man. I mean, definitely will deep more into your like exact actions, what you're doing right now. But I mean, what's your age? I mean, you might be just 18 or 19 right now.
Yeah,
Right?
I turned 18 some time ago.
So I mean, like you're meeting the presidents of countries and you're meeting formal delegations. You're representing yourself on international platforms. So like, where did it all start for you? What do you think? I mean, can you take us back to your school days when? What were those events which got you into this field of public negotiations and social action?
All right, sure. So, to give you a prelude, ever since my childhood, I have been really curious and zealous, and I love reading about things, diving deep into issues, and researching on things, and participating in new things, exploring different areas. So, if I talk about my pre-primary and primary school life, then I was quite active in both co-curricular activities and extracurricular activities. So this is the prelude. And then when I was somewhere around 11, 12 years old, I started doing MUN, which is abbreviation for Model United Nations. And at the age of 13, I organized my own MUN, which was organized in support of He for She campaign of United Nations Women. And it was Jodhpur's first MUN to be organized in support of a UN body.
Okay.
And I started chairing MUNs at the same age. But by the time I reached 14, the quality of MUNs fell dramatically. And
That was what year? At 14, which year was that?
it was 2018.
Okay, you were like approximately you were in 11th. No,
No, 9.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So at that point of time, you had already done a lot of conferences in different capacities, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but then what got you into like will like again go a bit backwards? Like, were you always interested in negotiations, change making, and social action on the international level, or what was that which pushed you into MUN or which got you to experience that?
Okay, so talking about how I got into MUNs, it is because, as I said earlier, that I love exploring new things, I trying new things, and divulging into new arenas. So that's how I got into MUNs. But talking about the social engagements and change making and policy making and other stuff, that was because the realizations I had. Like, for example, when I was 10 years old, I was in Ladakh. So it was a month of maybe May or June, and there were a lot of landslides because of rains. That year was quite rainy. So I interacted with people there, the local population, and I asked them that why don't they plant trees? Because at some places trees can be planted, and there is some level of vegetation in Ladakh. So they said that because trees bring rain. And if you see scientifically, then trees, they hold the ground, which prevents landslides. And reduces the intensities of landslides which happen.
Right.
So that made me realize that there's a lot to do in the world, and people, they don't know about a lot of stuff.
Right. And I
So
guess we were like you and like people who are educated enough are quite privileged to understand that. So like it was really like it's really interesting to know that you were being educated about like how trees and how environmental, I mean, other things affect environmental change, or maybe the basics. Kya cha, okay, the root holds the ground. So that was a really basic thing. But you when you were traveling to Ladakh, or when you were in Ladakh, you saw the application of it, and your curiosity allowed you to, or made you take action, that is communicating or like talking to the people around there. So that's how you got to think about the practicality aspect of social change. Am I right?
yeah.
Okay, okay, that's really interesting. And even for a lot of youth, I mean, we say ki acha, we don't have opportunities, we don't have this, we don't have that. We're not saying we're surrounded by opportunities. It's just that an action is necessary, right? I mean, you took the action of exploring your interests, or exploring the things which really meant to you, and that's why you were able to um, get a new perspective. Okay, that why is this not happening? Right? I mean, that's really important for people to know, I guess, these days, especially the youth. So then what was the next step? So like you realized that okay, a lot of social change is necessary, and a lot of people don't know about a lot of things which can actually make a change. So then what was your next thought or action?
So after that, I started researching more about fields of sustainable development and international relations and international cooperation, and how can countries come together to solve the issue of unsustainability and the climate crisis and other global issues. And meanwhile, also started engaging in a number of projects. One of these projects involved transitioning desert land in Jodhpur to eco parks using waste material, for which I even got an award by the wife of then Chief of Army Staff, General Bipin Rawat.
Okay, that's
And
amazing. So like how did the idea come in? I mean, you were in Jodhpur at that point of time.
yeah,
So did your backgrounds influence your thoughts? Ki okay, like there are a lot of deserts around Jodhpur. And Jodhpur itself is a desert, but now it's a city. So like, what helped you to get into that action of creating uh, the transitioning deserts into eco parks?
so like for bettering community life while improving the carbon sinks of that area, so that area could absorb more carbon from the air and store it in ground, and at the same time it could even be of some use to the community, to the people around, touching upon all the three aspects of sustainable development, which are social, environmental, and economic.
Okay, okay. And so then, like, when you had this thought, like, how did you get or start your action project? Like, what was the first step towards making that plan a reality?
So so basically, everything which I've done till date, I never planned all of it at first, because everything is quite volatile and it changes quite quickly. Like for example, if I plan for something for next month, then there will be a lot of changes in the span of next 30 days. So by the end, that plan will change completely. So I would say that I planned it in different phases, and first priority was the environment.
Okay, okay. But then, so like, you planned it, right? And then, like, which school were you in at that point of time?
I was in Army Public School, Jodhpur at that time.
APS Jodhpur.
Yeah.
So like, were you surrounded by people who were actually helping you out to take that action, or how did you manage that project physically, right? That was a physical project would happen where you um, transform that land, desert land, right? If I'm not sure.
I was more into the designing and the architecture and those areas.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So was it being like, is it being implemented now?
It has already been implemented.
Right. So like, amazing. I mean, this is an amazing initiative which you planned and like designed, which would actually make a huge difference. Then, what was the next step? Were you directly involved in the multilateral and bilateral relationship and negotiation after that, or like, what was the next stage for you?
Okay, so after that, as I told during the starting, that I loved exploring new things. So I came across something known as track to diplomatic dialogue, and
Track to
diplomatic dialogue,
Okay.
which is basically a formal informal discussion between diplomats and policymakers and the civil society. So I applied for that even though I wasn't meeting the eligibility criteria. They had certain criteria, like they were age criteria, they were qualification criteria, and multiple other criteria. So as I stated in the starting part of this video, I love exploring new arenas and trying new things. So one day I came across something known as track to diplomatic dialogue, which is basically a formal informal kind of discussion between policymakers, diplomats, and civil society. So like I keep searching for opportunities, and I keep dwelling deeper into them and searching for things to do. So I came across this thing, and though there were a lot of criterias, there were a lot of eligibility criterias like age criteria, educational qualifications criteria, and a dozen of other criterias, and I wasn't meeting any one of them. But still, I applied, and seeing my experience and my answers to their questions and my previous performance, they created an exception for me. So that's
Okay.
how I had my first diplomatic dialogue in an embassy.
That's interesting because I mean, from a layman's perspective, who is not yet involved into that kind of dialogue, I mean, we usually think that okay, they have a certain fixed set of procedures which can never be altered. But if you've shown that kind of experience and if you've shown that kind of engagement in social work, they would definitely consider your case. Is that so?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, interesting. And I mean, this is a new perspective because I never thought that. I mean, that's something which is possible. And I was always wondering, how could you, at such a young age, be involved in such important dialogues? And I guess even after this podcast, you have a Security Council meeting, right?
Yeah, today is the election briefing of the new members of the Security Council, so it's an interaction with them.
Amazing, man. I mean, at such a young age, it's seriously a new perspective for me. And I've never, to be honest, like, have you been introduced to such young people who've already been engaged in such dialogues? I mean, you're not even 20 right now, right? So
To be honest, no. Like I know a lot of people, but they are into protesting and striking and
Yeah.
all that stuff. They are not into dialogues and everything.
while we're talking about this, what do you think about protests and not a two-way communication or not action, advocacy? What do you think about pure advocacy, youth advocacy?
Okay, so if I talk about Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, there are 5 pillars of Sustainable Development Goals in Agenda 2030, and there is one pillar of them which is known as partnership. But a lot of people don't understand that, and they are only into blatantly protesting and asking for unrealistic things. If I talk about sustainable development, then it is simultaneous development of the economic, social, and environmental sphere. And what a lot of people they are doing, they haven't read a lot about it, and they are only focusing on the environment part, and they are having demands like cut down emissions to zero, maybe tomorrow, or things like that. And which is quite not possible. And we have to look towards the social spectrum also, how it is going to impact the people. Like a few years ago, France implemented a policy for reducing the carbon emissions, which was the carbon taxation policy. But that policy made fuel and other basic commodities out of reach for common people, and they were protests.
Okay.
Similarly, if I talk about Canada, then a couple of years ago, they shut down some of their coal mines. A lot of people were pushed into unemployment. So young people, instead of blatantly just protesting, they should understand the other spectrums of sustainable development also, and how it is going to, how only environmental actions will impact the social spectrum of sustainable development, and they should ask for more doable things. And
So
they
like the
should
practicality aspect is usually missing in such conversations, and I mean it's just about advocacy and it's about youth movements rather than okay, how are we actually impacting the climate situation on a major scale? Is that so?
Yeah, and
Right.
other than that, even if you see a lot of youth protests, they are having big posters which are printed on slacks and plastics, and then
I
which is
understand.
again like kind of like they are fighting for something and they are themselves using that.
But then, what do you think about this thought? So, like, we're talking about this, and I had this thought in my mind, and I read a book by Bill Gates. I don't remember the name, but it said that we talk about small things that will be picking up plastics and all these things. But on a larger scale, if you don't do that, that wouldn't matter, because climate change needs huge actions which implement or which reduce a lot of carbon or take us towards carbon neutrality and all these things. What I'm coming at is key. I wanted to understand your perspective on this. That a lot of people say that doing small actions wouldn't matter that much. Instead, we should do one huge action which reduces tons and tons of carbon, or maybe keeps large industries into check, which contribute to majority of the climate change issues. So, like, what do you think about the small actions or the small advocacy campaigns or the small no plastic campaigns which people take? Does that matter in a global level on the climate change movement?
See, I feel that it's the small actions which stage into big change. Like, for example, if we talk about the companies, then how are these companies existing? Because people are buying things from them. So if people discard them and go for, if they do a bit of research and go for the companies which are more greener, which are more eco-friendly, then it will automatically shift the scale of economy. And then talking about big actions, then it is a proven fact that climate change can't be solved only by new policies or by new technologies. It requires behavioral changes also. And there are 7.8 billion people on the earth right now, and if all of them take small initiatives and small actions in their day-to-day life, then it will for sure have a very big impact.
That's really important. And like, you know what, like we were taking this social action in the Hadapsar area slums in Pune itself, and we were working with an organization named Seva Sahyog.
Alright.
So what we were doing is we were trying to what we did was we distributed waste segregation bins to people in their homes, so that it goes on into that behavioral change campaign. What I realized that in that campaign was, while we were communicating with the Pune Municipal Corporation, the corporation that of the administration of the city, which like makes sure that the waste is segregated and all the other processes is followed. What I observed is, in that action, like a lot of things were being done by the government to reduce the mixing of waste and reduce the problems of waste management. But as the waste was not segregated from the source, none of those actions were utilized. And we always think that, okay, this is the government's responsibility, what's my role in it, the government is not doing this, not doing that. But as as citizens of this society, I believe it's even a lot more upon us how the resources which the government is spending are utilized. We should not just think of okay, government ka responsibility and they would fulfill it. It's even more of our responsibilities to make sure that those resources and the avenues which are there for the public development are used or are converted into actual change, right?
Yeah.
I'll introduce one more thing about advocacy here. What do you think about the campaigns, protest campaigns like the one which Greta Thunberg, Fridays for Future First Year, Greta Thunberg is promoting? What do you think about such campaigns? We talked about small changes, but then what about these advocacy campaigns which are majorly about getting youth together for change? But what's the output of that according to you?
See, if I talk about Fridays for Future, then again it is more about protesting. And okay, so I have a question for you. Have you heard about Boyan Slat or Arthur K?
Arthur K, I guess I've heard, but not Burns.
Okay, so Boyan Slat was this person. He is quite young, and he introduced new ways of cleaning the seas. And I feel that if he was given this much amplification as given to Greta Thunberg, then our oceans would have been a lot cleaner.
Are you
And
talking about ocean cleanup action?
yeah, that's one of his
Oh,
initiatives.
okay, yes.
Yeah, and he was even awarded with the UN, some award from UNEP, I suppose. So there are a lot of people who are doing things, who are doing actual practical things, and who are making who are making a difference on ground, but they are not recognized much and they are not amplified much. So I feel that we should amplify these people more.
Right. So like advocacy actions are not bad, but obviously the action which people are taking, like ocean cleanup or things which are actually working towards physical change in the climate, is even more important for us to promote and facilitate.
Yeah.
Right?
And moreover, I feel that Fridays for Future, it focuses majorly on protesting and asking for demands, and not much on spreading awareness of how things actually are, how complicated the SDGs are. Like for example, if I talk about SDGs, then there are about more than 28,000 interlinkages between all the SDGs.
Okay.
So there are a lot of things which are not being touched upon. And moreover, I personally do not feel that going crossing the Atlantic in a multi-million pound yacht is the solution for sustainable development and climate
But
crisis.
I believe there are multiple facets to this issue, as you said, right? It's a really complicated issue, so we can't discard any one thought for that. I mean, for me, I realize ki, as you said, action is important, but at the same time, if there isn't any advocacy, the policies wouldn't get that kind of traction from the community itself. And if we don't have traction from the community and conversations in the community, how would we move towards a behavioral change? So I guess all these things come hand in hand. I mean, that's my opinion. What do you think about that? I mean, everything is important, but some things are really important which are not being focused upon. That's something which I think. What do you think upon that?
Okay, so as I said earlier, that Fridays for Future, it greatly lacks awareness, and these, like the things I told you about sustainable development, like the three spectrums, the 5 pillars of Agenda 2030, and there are a lot of things which people are not aware about. And talking about the actual situation on ground, I know a lot of people who just go out, click pictures, post them on Instagram, hashtag Fridays for Future, then advocacy closed. So this is something which is not curbed.
So
and
it's
it
not
is today.
facilitated by action, you mean, right?
Yeah, and moreover, like as I told earlier, that a lot of these protests, they have a lot of things like plastic flexes and all, and so action is not there. And it lacks partnership. Like you cannot solve it just by going against the entire thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're just
partnership,
going
absolutely.
against the system, and this is something which even reflected here. I mean, people go against the system that this is not there, that is not there, but where is the partnership where people and organizations come together to make a change apart from just advocacy, pure advocacy, right? That's really brilliant thought, Parth, and coming from such a young person, it shows how much you've already experienced and done to get this mature thought, which brings out such perspectives that okay, it's not just advocacy that's gonna work, and also it's not just action or singular action from a single person which works. It needs all of us to come together for fulfilling a purpose and getting all the facets of social change together. That is advocacy, action, and not just in environment, but as you said, in social, environmental, and the third facet was.
It is already being given a lot of importance, so I won't give a lot of weightage to it, but it was economic,
Economic, right?
Yeah.
But so we're talking about economic, like
social and environmental.
economic, social, environment, right? About economic, I wanted to ask you one thing. So like, I'm involved in a business which manufactures eye reflective paints, and I've seen a lot of other, for say, let's say. Wooden toothbrushes. Okay, there are so many products which are there which give a really good alternative or solution to environmental problems, but they're not economically really fit to be adopted as products. Now, in the absence of such products, obviously plastics and all such like non-environmental products would be used. But then there's a gap between demand and supply and the economic availability of such green products. What do you think about this? How can this be solved according to you?
Okay, so when solar energy was first introduced, when it was a new concept, the prices were astronomical, and conventional energy was much cheaper. But now, as you see, as it is being adopted globally, and even during the pandemic, if you see the share of renewable energy and solar energy, to be specific, in power grids of some countries have gone up by 30 to 40%. So I feel that if more and more people they adopt for more sustainable solutions, then the scale of economies will surely bring down the cost of these products.
Okay, so I guess large scale adaptability and consumption would definitely solve it.
Yeah. Also, one more thing I would like to bring here is that when we talk about protests and when we talk about behavioral changes, then I guess last year UN Office of Youth Envoy launched a campaign which was named Reach Not Preach,
Okay.
which was basically about reaching people, making a change, and not just preaching them and coming back.
Oh, that's really important. That's really interesting to know that that's already been introduced. And so like, what's your current action? So like, apart from advocacy and apart from negotiations, what are the actions which you're involved in? which are making change in the physical world right now?
All right, so I work at three levels. First level is working with the youth and with organizations at the grassroots level, making changes in communities and small societies at the grassroots levels, and spreading awareness and empowering youth and communities and interacting with youths, getting to know their perspectives, their ideas, and helping them in implementing their ideas in forming their startups and social entrepreneurship,
Wow.
and connecting them with other like-minded people to amplify the action, to increase synergies, and reducing the gap between youth and policymakers. Like
And
in past,
and is that on an individual level or with an organization?
I do it alone,
Okay.
though I'm working with a lot of organizations, but I'm handling it alone as of now.
So like you're connected with a lot of organizations. So in that way, you were able to like give them collaborations or make sure that they're connecting with a group of like-minded organizations and partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and other than that, I'm reducing the gap between, bridging the gap between the youth and the policymakers. Like in past, I have led youth into a number of engagements and conferences and interactions with administration officials and other policymakers and diplomats and all. So this was the first level. Second level is working with organizations, with NGOs and other organizations at a bigger level. So I'm a volunteer with Child Rights in Ukraine. I'm working with another organization known as Unite 2030, which is based in New York. And I'm involved with Girl Up initiative of United Nations Foundation. And other than that,
So in what capacities are you involved in this? Like, are you there as in your circles, those people who are organizing these things, you're guiding them, or like you're personally involved in the national headquarters of these organizations?
so basically, my role varies from organization to organization. Like in CRY, I'm working as a volunteer, and
Okay.
I worked on a few projects on impact of COVID on children.
Okay.
And other than that, if I talk about UNA USA and Unite 2030, then then I work with a few other people where we ideate different events and hackathons and competitions and other webinars for spreading awareness about these issues.
Okay.
So my role varies from organization to organization.
Okay.
And the third level is working with policymakers, diplomats, and presidents, prime ministers, and other stakeholders, and industrialists, academicians, scientists, and working at the policymaking level, basically.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Making sure that there's a ground for people to take action.
Yeah, and making sure that these issues are discussed and they reach the table of the policymakers. So
Wow,
this
and
is the
it's so
third
heartening
level.
to see that young people are given that opportunity. And it's just that, I mean, I believe it's more about that people don't think that young people have that kind of experience and understanding to tackle those issues, and that's why they're not being involved. That's my opinion. But as you showed your experience and your understanding of the situations and the circumstances, organizations and partnerships were more than happy to welcome you on board with such policy making initiatives, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting. So, like, for people, this might come out as really overwhelming for such a young person to do all this. But I would like to occur here that, I mean, this was your interest, right? I mean, you were really passionate about all these things, am I right?
Yeah.
Right? So, it is not that the people here are obligated to do these things. If they're, my message is that you look at someone and you start comparing yourself with them. And to be honest, I see that, okay, you're doing so much. In my mind, this comes ki, okay, there are so many people who might be thinking, yeah, I'm not worth it, I can't do this, or I don't have those passions. And I think that not everyone has to do all of this. It's just that if they're interested into music, they explore their circumstances, their situations around them in such a way which you did in social change, right? I mean, if someone is involved in sports, they should take action on the things which they are passionate about, so that they reach at a level. And it's not just about reaching a level, they explore more of themselves and they contribute to the society by their own interests and actions, right? And especially for people who are into research or who are into technical fields, so-called technical fields, I think that there's a lot of also taboo that, okay, they're only into this. But as you said, right, you have a lot of other interests as well. I mean, apart from this also, you're involved not just in conversations on on international relations and all these things. You're even involved into practical actions, connecting organizations. You even have interest in aviation. So can you tell me a bit more about your other interests, which you do in your personal life, which you pursue in your personal life, apart from social change and action?
So my other interests are aviation, psychology, astronomy, and information technology, machines, artificial intelligence, weapons, military studies, and multilateral and bilateral relations.
So how are you exploring your interests in such areas? Like for example, aviation. I mean, you're interested, you're researching about it, or you're even taking some action to explore your interest. Like what are you doing these days?
Okay, so talking about my main interest, my main area of work, sustainable development, the best part is that it is connected with almost each and every other spectrum which is there. So, like for example, if I talk about aviation, like as you said, aviation. So sometimes I research about aviation, and as I have information because of my interest, as I have a bit of information about that field, so I try integrating it with my main area of work. That how can we make aviation more sustainable and how can it be bettered. So yeah, this is something which I do, and I use my these other interests of mine for exploring new opportunities for Earth as a whole and new innovations. Like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was invited for a webinar on space and sustainable development. So there, I explained that how can space be utilized for sustainable development, and then before that, last year, I guess I was invited for another session where the topic was Indo-China relations.
Okay.
So I'm pursuing my interests and then spreading awareness about them and exploring new avenues with context of sustainable development.
Right. So you're just cross-linking your interdisciplinary disciplinary interests, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's so important for people to notice here that, I mean, we think that, okay, if I do this in my young age, I would waste a lot of time and I would not make productive change in my interested sphere or maybe my professional life. But taking your example, the way you're integrating your interests and cross-linking them, it's always possible to like take up abstract fields and connect them, because every field has some human element which connects with each other to form a major change in any industry which you want, right? That's really interesting part. So like anything else which you want to like share with the viewers about, if they're feeling that I cannot do this, or if I see a person at such a like making change at such a large scale, I would not be able to do this, but he or she is able to do this because of some other reasons or their backgrounds or something. What would you tell such people to like show them that even they can do it? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I believe that security is just a superstition, and as Helen Keller said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And if you have the innovation, if you have the idea, and if you have the most important element, which is the will, then you can do literally everything in the world.
Right, will is really important. So take action on what you really believe in, what you're passionate about, and definitely you'll land up in a place where you'll find making change not just for yourself but even for the community, right?
Yeah, and other than inspiration, perspiration is really important.
What do you mean by that?
So a lot of times people, they are waiting to get inspired, and they feel that when I feel inspired for this thing, then I do it. But they often lack the perspiration, which is the, you can say, the self-drivenness and self-motivation and the hard-working element.
The ability to just get into it.
Yeah.
That's really important. I guess that's why this podcast was started, so that people don't just get a perspective, but they get a push that now is the time. I mean, we usually defer the role of the youth to the future, but I mean, that's just a rhetoric. You're a young person who's making change right now. So what's stopping you? I mean, you can obviously just start right now and perspire, not just wait to be inspired. Amazing, Parth. I mean, it was great to having you here, and I had a amazing time with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.